Now, when we contacted him about coming to Dallas for this conference, he replied on the phone that he had just happened that morning to be writing on the original Waters of Forgetfulness and Memory, Mnemosyne. And so to give us the mythic beginnings of Water and Dreams, I present to you Ivan Illich.
Thank you, Gail Thomas. In 3 days, you have made me feel at home in Dallas, Texas. The next thing which happened, you forgot to say, Bob Sardello's paper on the metaphors of the city of cancer, heart attack, and herpes genitalis arrived. And this paper has certainly inspired what I'm going to say. And I'm trying to continue our conversation as if we were still comfortable sitting in the ranch. And some of the people who have not been with us at the ranch just sit here and listen in on our conversation. I'm really continuing to speak where Tom Moore this morning stopped when he said that HWO has become a metaphor for the city child, for what water was. I want to deal with the great ambiguity which lies there. In 1616, William Harvey announced to the London College of Physicians that he had discovered the circulation of the blood. That's well known. When he published his theory 12 years later, in the Exercitatio Anatomica de Motu Cordis, and so on, it constituted a major contribution towards the transformation of flesh and blood into that social construct which today we call the human body. The mercantilist conception of wealth, which depends on the flow and circulation of money, and the medical conception of health, which depends on the circulation of blood, are both essential to the constitution of that new kind of human being who has come into existence, whom people like René Dumont call Homo economicus. It's a new type of biped. It took another 120 years, until a group of British architects began to speak of the City of London according to the very same paradigm, and several times refer in their writings to the immortal Harvey, the model for the architect. For them, the city was perceived as an entity that lives on the incessant circulation of water, according to this unprecedented image of a habitat. Water must constantly flow into the city and, with as little delay as possible, must flow out of it, carrying the city's wastes and sweat, urines and excrements. This new architectonic, fundamentally structuring conception of the city, which will stagnate and rot until water washes it day and night, took a full further century, until it acquired the semblance of naturalness which it held, I'm not saying into the 80s, but certainly through the 60s of our century. We live today in cities, wherever the world is developed. This is a sign, an index of development, where 42%, it's almost a magical number, 42% of the total water pumped into the city for households is used in order to dilute excrements. The amount of money which you pump into the city to achieve this is half of that which it is in the United States, in England. The percentage used for this particular purpose, and I'm not speaking of further 12 to 15% for washing floors and clothes, remains the same. As used as we are to flush toilets and blood transfusions, we easily forget the creative genius of the men who invented these constructs. Harvey created something previously unthinkable, namely blood as a medium of circulation, and water, and the water as the lifeblood of the city that cleanses the city, created by Chadwick and Ward and their colleagues, is just as new. And just as Harvey's blood cannot vivify that microcosm which physicians of the type of Hippocrates or Galen or Paracelsus saw when they faced human flesh and blood, but this circulating blood called for a recasting of flesh and blood into the body, whose history Michel Foucault has attempted to write. So Chadwick's circulating water calls forth a new perception of the city. Like the body of the city, the city also has become a system of pipes. I just had the wonderful experience that I asked 7 people if I couldn't walk with them across this place which is built for walking. All 7 had to drive across it on some very complicated channels which lead from over there over here. They are all here. No, one couldn't come. I want to call attention to the metaphorical degradation of water, which is the result of its perception as a piped and metered cleaning fluid that is needed constantly to wash the city from its evil smells. Since this contribution today has to fit into 30 minutes, and since this meeting is not concerned with the water as a natural resource, a commodity, a fluid playground, and a lure for development, but principally as a metaphor, I cannot go into the full development of this H2O washing device which the city needs, but can only focus on contrasting mnemosyne with H2O. The water in the faucet constantly flows back and forth across the city's limits. This has changed, of course, in the 70s with the water cleaning kidneys, which we construct next to cities. With the faucet, also the sewer began to flow. Old sewers did not flow. Historically, it's a mistake to believe that sewers flowed. In Indo-Germanic languages, water did not flow principally from a city's point of view. Water itself is a limit. It separates this world from the other, the past from the next. This is the world of the dead, this other world. And Indo-Germanic myth has no fixed location for the other world. For some traditions, the other world lies below the earth. For others, on a star, in the sky, on Mount Olympus, on an island, far west. But for all these Indo-Germanic traditions, the other world is the realm beyond a body of water, beyond an ocean, a lake, or a stream. You can be carried across by a ferryman, but more often it is a river you must ford yourself. And what lies beyond these waters in myth, these waters that separate us from the dead, in all this myth is a spring which the river feeds. You can find this everywhere. In Greek, the name of this river-fed spring is also that of the first goddess, Mnemosyne. Bruce Lincoln has shown that at bottom Greek, Indic, Nordic, and Celtic funeral geographies are nourished by the same mythical hydrology. The picture that emerges is as follows. On the way to the other world, the traveler has to cross a flowing river which washes his memories from his feet. But these memories are not destroyed. The river carries them back to a spring, there they bubble up again. Privileged ones. And I thank you for sharing your privilege with us. Privileged ones gain access to this spring and can drink from its waters. The epical singer, the prophet, some heroes, some seers, returning from a trip to a realm of the dead, from a dream, I just thought from Northumberland, from a mystical journey, they bring these memories back to a world which needs them, for whom they constitute the greatest gift. The dead have no need for their memories, but their memories are of immense value for the living. Not the dead depend on the living, but the living depend on the dead. They depend on the memories from the bubbling pool of Mnemosyne. What the river Lethe, the stream of forgetfulness, washes from those who cross it, that river carries and nourishes the clear pond of remembrance, which is a community's greatest treasure, and which was born at the beginning of time. Because when heaven still lay in the arms of earth, those who know the very old Greek poetry will see that I'm just putting old poems together. When the heavens still lay in the arms of earth, when Uranus still shared the bed with the broad-hipped Gaia, the Titans came into being, and with them Mnemosyne. In the hymn of Hermes, she is called the mother of the Muses, the firstborn of all women. Hesiod remembers her flowing hair when Zeus lies in bed with her to engender her daughters. From her comes the muse of enthusiasm, but also that of forgetfulness. She's the godmother, not the real mother, but somehow the one standing by, of Apollon, the only god who cannot forget, who is himself drenched with the knowledge of the source. Mnemosyne appears as the Titans, as the social birth of water. Water, the cosmic element, here in this story becomes the source of remembrance and of culture. And at the same time that it becomes social, it acquires the features of woman. This image of water in turn fades. This I would not like to forget in our discussions, with the transition from oral to written culture, from archaic to the classical town in Greece. Memory is a bubbling pool beyond the river of forgetfulness. Memory is a source nourished by the river that strips the dead of their encumbrance. Memory, as the mother of Hermes Apollo, does not fit the world of fountain and book. And the merchant on the market of Athens at the time Aristotle lived. As the trader becomes a merchant and water is brought in by aqueduct, this happens probably more so in Rome, and the sources of tradition become the book, the pool of remembrance fed by the river of forgetfulness recedes into the mysteries, becomes secret knowledge. Mnemosyne receives no cult at all. The term is used henceforth as a mere personification of a new faculty which distinguishes the new city dweller from the old, the faculty of memory which each one now carries written in his heart, like a tablet, a page, or a slab. Plato, with his magnificent ambiguity to the letters, tells the story of Ammon, the king of Egypt, who tried to refuse the gift of this memory that dries up the power of remembrance, as he said, that Thoth wanted to bring to him from Heliopolis. This particular transformation of water in social imagination must be studied and recognized if we want to shake off the spell that a confusion between archaic and classic Mnemosyne and water so easily throw over our reflections. The complaint, because we complain, and for this I think it one way, simply because I happen to be somewhat competent on it, I tell the story, to study how water changed. It became a cleaning fluid. I want to speak exactly about water as the removal of stench. The complaint about the city being a dirty place has a history which goes back into antiquity. You might remember that on the Forum there was a special place with people sitting in little tents for these smaller discussions of somebody having been hit by a night pot thrown down on the on the street. But the obsession with the city as a dirty place, as a place that must be constantly deodorized, is clearly part and parcel not of antiquity. There might be some places where the city was particularly clean, but of the Enlightenment. And the obsession is not primarily, this Enlightenment obsession is not primarily of a visual, but of olfactory origin. The obsession with the city as an evil-smelling place is due to a profound transformation in the perception of smell that happened on the continent as well as in England during the mid-decades of the 18th century. We begin to know something about this part of history, the history of the perceptions of smell. The last 25 years have seen a growing interest by historians in the transformation of sense perceptions, building on Norbert Elias and his teacher Lefebvre. Robert Mandrou in 1961 was the first to call attention to the primacy of touching and smelling and hearing in early Europe, which only slowly gave way to our primacy of the eye, which we now take for granted.